The alarm started ringing at 3 in the morning. Dr. Yuna Kim jumped out of bed and grabbed her phone. The screen showed 17 missed calls from the observatory. Her hands shook as she called back. "Yuna, you need to get here now." Her colleague's voice cracked through the speaker. "Something big is coming." She drove through empty streets, her mind racing. 20 years of searching for signals from space and nothing. Now something appears and her gut told her it wasn't friendly. The Korean Space Agency building blazed with lights. Every room was full of people staring at screens. Yuna pushed through the crowd and saw it. A massive object, no, hundreds of objects moving past Jupiter. They weren't natural. They weren't ours. "How big?" she asked. "The largest one is the size of our moon," her assistant replied. "There are over 300 ships." Yuna's stomach dropped. She picked up the phone and called Dr. Taeho Park at the United Earth Defense Network. He answered on the first ring. "You're seeing it too?" he asked. "Yes, Taeho, this is real. I know. I'm sending the data to every government right now." "Yuna, they'll be here in less than 3 days." She hung up and looked at the screens again. The ships moved with purpose in perfect formation. This wasn't exploration. This was invasion. Across the world, other observatories confirmed the same thing. Within 2 hours, emergency meetings started in every capital city. Military bases went on high alert. News networks interrupted regular programming with breaking news. At the United Nations building in New York, young Min-ho Choi sat in front of 6 computer screens. He worked in the First Contact Division, a department created 20 years ago that everyone thought was a waste of money. Not anymore. His phone rang. It was his sister. "Minho, are you watching the news?" Hana's voice was steady, but he could hear the worry underneath. She was a military strategist at the Defense Ministry in Seoul. "I'm at work. We're trying to figure out what they want." "I think we already know," Hana said quietly. Minho closed his eyes. She was right. Species didn't travel across space with hundreds of warships unless they wanted something. And they didn't ask nicely. The transmission came 12 hours later. Every radio, every television, every computer connected to the internet received it at the same time. The voice spoke in perfect Korean, perfect English, perfect Mandarin, perfect every language on Earth. "People of Earth, we are the Vrex Collective. Your world has resources we require. Your resistance is pointless. We have eliminated 847 civilizations across this galaxy. You will surrender your planet within 72 hours, or we will take it by force. Choose wisely." The message ended. Silence fell across the planet for exactly 3 seconds. Then the screaming started. Minho stared at his screen. Captain Subin Han, the team's linguist, was already analyzing the transmission. "They didn't negotiate," she said. "They didn't explain. They just demanded." "How many languages did they broadcast in?" Minho asked. "All of them. Every single human language. Even dead ones. They studied us, that made it worse. The aliens knew exactly who they were threatening." This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was extermination with a countdown. In Seoul, Hana stood in a room full of generals and politicians. Everyone was shouting. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Others demanded they fight. A few prayed quietly in the corner. "We have to evacuate the cities," one general said. "Evacuate to where?" Another shot back. "They have 300 ships. There's nowhere to hide." Hana looked at the tactical displays. Earth had 6 orbital defense platforms, 42 fighter squadrons capable of space combat, 17 nuclear missiles that could reach low orbit. Against 300 alien warships, it was nothing. It was suicide, but she knew humanity. She knew they wouldn't surrender without a fight. "Prepare the orbital defenses," she ordered. "Get every pilot ready. If we only have 3 days, we use them." At the orbital defense platform, Colonel Dong-Yun Lee gathered his crew. The platform had been built to defend against asteroid impacts and rogue satellites. Now it would face alien warships with weapons they couldn't even imagine. "Sir, what are our orders?" asked Lieutenant Jisoo Nam. She was one of the best pilots in the Space Defense Force. She was also 26 years old and terrified. "We defend Earth," Dong-Yun said simply. "We buy time for the people on the ground. We make them pay for every inch of space." Jisoo nodded. She understood. This wasn't about winning. This was about dignity. Back in New York, Minho worked through the second night without sleep. His team collected every piece of data about the Vrex transmission. They analyzed the signal patterns, the frequency variations, the embedded code. Subin called him over to her station. "Minho, look at this. The transmission isn't just broadcast. It's networked." "What do you mean?" "They're all connected. Every ship, every alien, they share information instantly. It's like one giant mind. Minho leaned closer to the screen. His tired brain struggled to understand the implications. If they were all connected, then what one knew, they all knew. What one experienced, they all experienced. An idea began forming in his mind. A crazy, desperate, probably impossible idea. Sobin, can we transmit back to them? Yes, but why would we? They already made their demands. What if we don't send a message? What if we send everything? She looked at him like he was insane. Everything? They studied us. They learned our languages. But did they really understand us? Do they know who we are? The countdown continued. 60 hours remaining. The Vrex fleet passed Mars. Earth's military scrambled to prepare defenses that everyone knew wouldn't work. Families said goodbye to each other. Religious leaders spoke of the end times. Scientists worked frantically on weapons that wouldn't be ready in time. And in a small office at the United Nations, a young man named Minho Choi started to believe that humanity's only weapon wasn't guns or bombs. It was truth. He just had to convince everyone else before the time ran out. The alien ships kept coming, dark against the stars, unstoppable and cold. Earth waited, terrified and defiant for whatever would come next. The alien fleet moved closer. 48 hours left, then 36, then 24. Earth's military prepared for the end. Colonel Dong-Hyun Lee walked through the orbital defense platform, checking every system personally. His crew worked without stopping, but he saw the fear in their eyes. They all knew the truth. They were going to die up here. Colonel, Lieutenant Jisoo Nam approached him. The pilots are ready. We've said our goodbyes. Dong-Hyun looked at the young woman. She had her whole life ahead of her. Now she was volunteering to die in the first wave of a battle they couldn't win. Why did you volunteer, Jisoo? She thought for a moment. Because if we don't fight, then we already lost. At least this way we go down trying. He nodded. That was the human spirit. Stupid, maybe. Brave definitely on Earth, the governments argued. Some countries wanted to surrender immediately. Others refused. The United Nations held emergency sessions every hour. Nothing was decided. Nothing could be decided, but something strange was happening. Something the Vrex didn't expect. Humans started sending messages to the alien fleet. Not from the governments. From regular people. Millions of messages. Then billions. A teacher in Brazil recorded a video of her students singing their national anthem. A father in Japan wrote a letter to his daughter, telling her he loved her, then promising to fight for her future. A grandmother in Kenya sent a recipe for her famous stew, with a note saying, "Even if you take our world, you can't take our memories." Artists uploaded their paintings. Musicians shared their songs. Scientists transmitted their research. Historians sent records of human civilization. Soldiers recorded messages promising to make the aliens pay for every human life. The data flooded toward the Vrex fleet. Petabytes of information. Images, videos, text, music, mathematics, art. It was chaos. It was beautiful. It was very, very human. On the Vrex command ship, Commander Seeloth watched the flood of transmissions with confusion. His tactical officer, Velrin, tried to filter the data, but there was too much. What are they doing? Seeloth asked. I don't know, Commander. Most species either surrender or attack. These humans are just talking and singing and sending us pictures of food. Are any of the transmissions military intelligence? Some, but mostly it's just life. They're showing us their lives. Seeloth had conquered 847 worlds. He had never seen anything like this. It was inefficient. It was illogical. It was annoying, but it was also disturbing. Because the Vrex collective consciousness was experiencing all of it. Every transmission, every song, every goodbye message. All 400 billion Vrex across the Empire were being bombarded with human emotion. Back on Earth, Minho Choi worked on his plan. He had convinced his supervisor to listen. Then the supervisor convinced her boss. Now Minho stood in front of the Emergency Earth Council, the temporary government formed to handle the crisis. You want to send them what? The American representative asked. Everything, Minho repeated. Every piece of human history we can digitize. Every war. Every peace treaty. Every scientific discovery. Every work of art. Everything. That's what people are already doing, the Chinese representative pointed out. No, Minho shook his head. People are sending the good things. The beautiful things. I want to send the ugly things too. I want to send them our failures. Our crimes. Our darkest moments. The room fell silent. Why would we do that? Someone asked. Minho took a deep breath. Because they're all connected. They share one mind, and I think they've never met a species that truly understands itself. We need to show them that we know exactly who we are. The good and the bad, and we need to show them that we choose to be better anyway. That's insane, the Russian representative said. You want to show them our weaknesses? They already know we're weaker than them militarily, Minho replied. But maybe they don't know what that means. Maybe they don't know what it means to be weak and still fight, to be broken and still rebuild, to be capable of terrible things and still choose good. Captain Subin stood up beside Minho. I've analyzed their communication patterns. They're a collective mind. They've never fought themselves. They've never had civil wars. They've never had to question their own nature. They just expand, conquer, repeat. We might be the first species they've met that looks in the mirror and doesn't like what it sees but keeps trying to be better anyway. The council debated for hours. 12 hours left until the deadline. The Vrex fleet was past the asteroid belt. Earth's fighters launched from their bases ready for the final battle. Finally, the council voted. It was close, but they agreed. They would try Minho's plan. Dr. Yuna Kim led the technical team. They had 8 hours to compile and transmit the largest data package in human history. Universities opened their archives. Governments declassified documents. Museums sent digital copies of everything. Libraries uploaded their entire collections. But the core of the message, the part Minho insisted on, was different. It was a carefully curated history of humanity's worst moments and what came after, the Holocaust and the tribunals that followed. The atomic bombs and the treaties banning their use, the slavery and the civil rights movements, the genocides and the international courts created to prevent them, every environmental disaster and every effort to fix it, every war crime and every war crime trial. Professor Junho Lee, a historian, worked through the night organizing it all. This is either genius or suicide, he muttered. Maybe both, Yuna replied. Hana Choi coordinated the military side. The fighters held position. The orbital platforms aimed their weapons. If this didn't work, they would die fighting. But they would give Minho his chance first. With 2 hours left, Lieutenant Hyejin Seo sat at the transmission facility. The data was ready, compressed into the most efficient format possible, designed to be unfiltered by the Vrex systems. It would hit their collective consciousness all at once. Ready when you are, she told Minho. Minho looked at the screen. This was it. His crazy plan, his desperate hope. He thought about everything the message contained. All the beauty and horror of being human, all the triumph and tragedy. He thought about his sister Hana ready to die in orbit, about Jisoo Nam climbing into her fighter for a suicide mission, about every human who ever chose to be better than they had to be. Send it, he said. The transmission launched. It crossed the void between Earth and the Vrex fleet at the speed of light. 19 minutes later, it would reach them. 19 minutes to find out if humans were about to die, or about to teach the galaxy something it had never learned. Minho sat down and waited. They all waited. Earth held its breath. 19 minutes felt like 19 years. Minho Choi sat in the UN command center surrounded by screens showing the alien fleet. Next to him, Subin Han monitored the transmission status. Behind them, dozens of officials and scientists waited in silence. Transmission received, Subin said quietly. They're processing it now. On the Vrex command ship, the data hit their systems like a tsunami. Commander Zeloth felt it first. The collective consciousness, normally calm and ordered, suddenly flooded with information. Images, sounds. Emotions, history, pain, joy, everything. He saw a city burning. Tokyo, 1945. The atomic fire consuming everything. Then he saw the same city rebuilt. Peaceful. Thriving. The same humans who created the weapon choosing never to use it again. He saw concentration camps, guards hurting people to death. Then he saw the trials. The same species that committed the horror putting the criminals on trial. Creating laws, saying never again and meaning it. He saw wars, so many wars. Humans killing humans for thousands of years. But between each war, peace, treaties, cooperation, former enemies becoming allies. Velrin staggered at his station. Commander, I'm seeing... They fought themselves? Their own species? Yes, Zeloth replied, his mind reeling. For their entire history, the Vrex Collective had never experienced this. They had expanded across space for 50,000 years without ever fighting themselves. They had no internal conflicts, no civil wars, and no revolutions. They simply agreed and acted as one. But humans were different. Humans fought each other constantly, and somehow they kept choosing to stop fighting, to rebuild, to forgive, to try again. More data flooded in. Medical records of doctors treating enemy soldiers. Stories of people hiding refugees at risk of their own death. Scientists refusing to build weapons they knew were too terrible. Soldiers disobeying orders they believed were wrong, and mixed with the good, the terrible. Slavery, torture, genocide, chemical weapons, biological warfare. Humans had done it all. To each other. But what disturbed Zeloth most was what came after each atrocity. Acknowledgement, teaching, memorials, laws, systems specifically built to prevent repetition. Museums dedicated to remembering the victims. Schools teaching children about the mistakes so they wouldn't repeat them. They remember their failures, Velrun said in amazement. They teach their young about the terrible things they did. Why would they do that? Another officer asked. Then the core message played. The one Minho had written personally. It appeared in their minds in perfect Vrex language. We know what we are. We have studied ourselves for thousands of years. We know we are capable of great love and terrible cruelty. We have nearly destroyed ourselves 12 times in recorded history. Each time we pulled back from the edge. Not because we evolved past violence. Not because we became perfect. But because we chose. We chose to be better. We built laws against our own worst instincts. We created international courts to judge our own crimes. We teach our children about our failures so they don't repeat them. You are stronger than us. Your technology is superior. You will probably win this war. But understand what you're destroying. You're not facing a species driven by instinct. You're facing a species that looks at its own darkness every day and chooses light anyway. We won't surrender. We won't stop fighting. Not because we think we can win, but because choosing to fight for what's right even when you know you'll lose is what makes us human. Is that really an enemy you want? The message ended. The Vrex collective consciousness went completely silent for the first time in recorded history. 47 billion minds all stunned into stillness. On Earth, the countdown reached 0. The deadline passed. The Vrex fleet didn't attack. What's happening? Someone asked in the UN command center. I don't know, Subin replied. They're not moving. They're not transmitting. They're just stopped. Minho felt his heart pounding. Had it worked? Had they listened? Or were they just preparing for the attack? In orbit, Colonel Dongyun Lee watched his tactical display. The alien ships hadn't moved in 15 minutes. His fighters were in position. His weapons were ready, but the enemy just sat there. Should we attack first? One of his officers asked. No, Dongyun said. We wait. Lieutenant Chizunam sat in her fighter cockpit, hands on the controls. She had made peace with dying. She had recorded goodbye messages to her family. She was ready. But now nothing happened. The waiting was almost worse than the fighting. On the Vrex flagship, Commander Zeloth called an emergency council. The collective consciousness was in chaos. Different factions were forming for the first time in millennia. Some wanted to proceed with the invasion. Others wanted to withdraw. The arguments were breaking the usual unity. They're primitives, one faction argued. Their technology is nothing. We should proceed. But did you see what they sent us? Another countered. They understand themselves. They know their own capacity for evil and actively work against it. So what? That makes them dangerous. No, a third voice joined. It makes them unique. We've conquered 847 civilizations. All of them were driven by instinct or simple expansion. None of them had this level of self-awareness. None of them chose their own moral evolution. Zeloth listened to the debate. He reviewed the human data again, particularly one part that disturbed him deeply. The humans had sent footage from something called the Nuremberg trials. After their largest war, the winning side put their enemies on trial. They didn't just execute them. They held courts, presented evidence, established guilt, created international law. Then he saw something else. The same humans, decades later, putting their own soldiers on trial for war crimes committed during other conflicts. They judged themselves by the same standards they set for their enemies. What species does that? Velrun approached him. Commander, we need to decide. The collective is splitting. This has never happened before. I know, Zeloth replied. These humans have done something no species has ever done to us. They've made us question ourselves. He looked at the tactical display showing Earth, a small blue planet, technologically primitive, militarily weak, but somehow more dangerous than any enemy they'd faced, not because of what humans were now, but because of what they might become. A species with this level of self-awareness, this capacity for conscious moral choice, given another 1,000 years, another 10,000, they would spread across the galaxy, and they would carry this strange, powerful idea with them, that being good is a choice that must be made every single day. How long have they been a spacefaring civilization? Siloth asked. Less than 100 years. And they already have orbital platforms and fighter craft? Yes, their technology is advancing rapidly. Siloth made his decision. He opened a channel to the entire Vrex fleet. Every ship, every mine, prepare to transmit to Earth all frequencies. On Earth, alarms started ringing. The Vrex were sending another message. Everyone braced for the attack order, but what they received was something no one expected. The Vrex transmission came through on every frequency. Every device on Earth received it simultaneously. This time the voice sounded different, less commanding, almost uncertain. People of Earth, we are processing your transmission. We require time to reach consensus. We will not attack during this period. Stand down your military forces. We mean no immediate harm. Then silence again. In the UN command center, chaos erupted. What does that mean? Someone shouted, "Are they playing with us?" Another asked. Minho Choi stared at the translation on his screen. Zubin Han was already analyzing the linguistic patterns. Minho, she said slowly. They've never used words like require consensus before. Their first message was absolute. This one is uncertain. They're debating, Minho realized. We made them debate. Dr. Yuna Kim pulled up the astronomical data. The fleet has stopped moving. They're holding position. They're not preparing weapons. They're just waiting. Colonel Dongyun Lee received the stand-down order from Earth Command. He didn't trust it. How could he? But orders were orders. All units maintain defensive positions but do not engage unless fired upon. He transmitted to his forces. Lieutenant Jisoo Nam felt her muscles relax slightly. Not dead yet, maybe not dying today. But she kept her hands on the controls ready. On the Virex flagship, the debate intensified. The collective consciousness was experiencing something unprecedented. Disagreement. A senior Vrex strategist presented her analysis. Commander Zeloth, I have reviewed the human data extensively. I believe we are facing a critical miscalculation. Explain, Zeloth commanded. We assumed humans were like the other 847 species we conquered, but they are fundamentally different. Every other species either evolved for cooperation or competition. Humans evolved for both simultaneously. They compete with each other constantly, but they also cooperate at scales that should be impossible for a competitive species. She displayed data on the screens. Look at this. During their Second World War, they built weapons capable of destroying their entire civilization. They used them twice. Then they stopped. They created international organizations specifically to prevent their use again. They have had these weapons for over 80 years and never used them in war again. That could be simple survival instinct, another officer argued. No, the strategist continued. Survival instinct would mean keeping the weapons for defense. But look closer. Many of their nations have reduced their nuclear arsenals voluntarily. They have treaties limiting weapons they already built. They choose to be weaker in order to be safer. What species does that? Velrun added his own observations. I've been analyzing their art and philosophy. They're obsessed with morality. They have thousands of philosophical traditions arguing about right and wrong. They don't just act on instinct. They consciously debate every action's ethical implications. That makes them slow and inefficient, someone argued. Or thoughtful and adaptable, Velrun countered. They sent us their worst moments. The Holocaust, Hiroshima, Rwanda. They didn't have to. They could have hidden those parts of their history. But they showed us anyway. Why? Because they want us to understand that they know what they're capable of, and they actively work to prevent it. A young Vrex analyst named Nethril spoke up hesitantly. Permission to share an observation, Commander? Granted. I've been studying their historical patterns. After every major conflict, they create new systems to prevent repetition. After the Napoleonic Wars, they created the Concert of Europe. After World War I, the League of Nations. After World War II, the United Nations. After every genocide, new international laws. They don't just learn from mistakes. They institutionalize the learning. Siloth listened carefully. The humans had done something extraordinary. They had hacked the Vrex collective consciousness not with technology, but with honesty. They had shown the Vrex something the Vrex had never seen before. A species that studies its own darkness and builds systems to resist it. What about their military capabilities? Another commander asked. Even if they're morally interesting, they're still primitives. The strategist pulled up more data. They've been spacefaring for less than a century. They already have orbital infrastructure, fighter craft, and weapons that can reach low orbit. Their technological advancement rate is exponential. Projecting forward, in 1,000 years, they'll likely match our current technology. In 10,000 years, they may surpass us. Then we should eliminate them now while they're weak. The room fell silent. That was the obvious military answer. It's what the Vrex had done to other potentially dangerous species before. But Siloth was thinking about something else. Something in the human message that disturbed him on a deep level. Pull up the section about their philosophers, he ordered. The data appeared. Thousands of years of human philosophy. Arguments about justice, ethics, duty, rights, freedom. Most of it was primitive compared to Vrex thinking. But some of it was not. One philosopher caught his attention. A human named Hannah Arendt, who wrote about something called the banality of evil. The idea that terrible acts weren't always committed by monsters, but by ordinary people who stopped thinking about their choices. Another philosopher, named Immanuel Kant, argued that moral worth came from acting on principle, not from consequences. That doing the right thing mattered even when it didn't benefit you. The humans hadn't just thought about these ideas. They had built them into their laws, their education, their culture. They taught their children to question authority, to think about consequences, to stand up for others even at personal cost. They're teaching themselves to be better, Siloth said quietly. What? Velrun asked. The Vrex have been stable for 50,000 years. We don't change. We don't need to. We reached optimal organization millennia ago, but humans are different. They're constantly changing themselves. Constantly questioning, constantly trying to improve. He pulled up footage of human children in schools, learning about history. Learning about the Holocaust, about slavery, about all the terrible things humans had done, and being taught to recognize the patterns, to resist them, to be better. They're not perfect, Siloth continued. They showed us that. They're still violent, still divided, still flawed, but they're aware of their flaws and actively working against them. That's not evolution. That's conscious choice. So what do we do? The strategist asked. Siloth looked at the blue planet on his screen. Earth, such a small world, such a young species, but carrying inside them something rare, maybe unique, the choice to be better. If we invade, he said slowly, we become the test. We become the measure of whether their choice was real. If they surrender easily, it proves their message was empty. But if they fight as they promised, knowing they'll lose, fighting anyway on principle, it proves they meant it, Velrun finished. And more, Siloth added. It proves that the only species in the galaxy that understands its own capacity for evil chose to fight against us anyway. We would be forcing them to choose between survival and principle. That's not a test I want to administer. The collective consciousness was beginning to reach consensus. Slowly, across 47 billion minds, an agreement was forming. These humans were dangerous. Not now, but potentially. They had the kind of dangerous that came from choosing your own path instead of following instinct. The dangerous that came from looking at yourself honestly and still trying to be good. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. Commander, Velrun said quietly, what if we withdraw? Siloth considered it. In 50,000 years, the Vrex had never withdrawn from a planned conquest without fighting first. It would be unprecedented, but then so was this entire situation. Prepare a transmission to Earth, he ordered. Full collective consensus required. All Vrex must agree. The debate continued for 6 more hours. Earth waited, not knowing what was happening aboard the alien ships. Finally, consensus was reached. Commander Siloth prepared to send a message that would change everything. The transmission came after 6 hours of terrible silence. Everyone on Earth had been waiting, not knowing if the next message would be an attack warning or something else. Minho Choi was half asleep at his desk when the alarms went off. He jerked awake. Subin Han was already at her station pulling up the incoming data. "It's them," she said. "It's a long message this time." The translation appeared on screens across the world. Every government, every military base, every news station received it simultaneously. Commander Zeloth's voice spoke in every human language. "People of Earth, the Vrex Collective has reached consensus. We have consumed your message in its entirety. All 47 billion Vrex have experienced your history. We have seen your wars and your peace, your cruelty and your compassion, your failures and your choices to do better. We are 50,000 years old. We have conquered 847 worlds. Not once have we encountered a species like yours. Not once has a species shown us itself so completely, knowing we would see both the beauty and the horror." Minho held his breath. Subin gripped his hand. The message continued. "You were correct in your assessment. We would likely win a military conflict. Our technology is superior. Our forces are greater. But we have decided we do not want to be the species that extinguished the one species in the galaxy, brave enough to know itself. You sent us evidence of your capacity for terrible acts. But you also sent us evidence that you judge yourselves for those acts. You create laws against your own worst instincts. You teach your children to recognize and resist the patterns that led to your darkest moments. This is unprecedented." Around the world, people stopped what they were doing and listened. In Seoul, Hana Choi stood in the military command center, tears streaming down her face. On the orbital platform, Colonel Donghyun Lee gripped his chair. In her fighter cockpit, Lieutenant Jisoo Nam started crying. The message continued. "We are withdrawing from Earth space. Not in fear of your weapons. You have no weapons that could stop us. We withdraw in respect for your choice. You nearly destroyed yourselves multiple times and chose differently. That choice is rare. Perhaps unique in this galaxy. We will not take it from you." Minho couldn't believe what he was hearing. Subin was openly sobbing. Around them, the UN command center erupted in shocked gasps. "You are the youngest spacefaring species we have encountered," the Vrex continued. "You are also the most terrifying. Not because of what you are now. Your current military power is insignificant. You are terrifying because of what you might become. A species with your level of self-awareness and your capacity for conscious moral choice, given another 1,000 years, another 10,000 years, could reshape this galaxy. We do not know if that would be good or bad. But we know it would be significant." The voice paused. When it resumed, it sounded almost respectful. "We leave you with this warning and this hope. You have shown us that you understand your own darkness. Continue to remember it. Continue to teach it. Continue to build systems that resist it. Your greatest strength is not your technology or your weapons. Your greatest strength is your willingness to look at your worst selves and choose to be better. Do not lose that. Grow, evolve, reach the stars. And when you do, perhaps you can teach the rest of the galaxy what you know that we do not. How to choose to be better." A new piece of data appeared on the screens. Star charts, coordinates, locations of habitable worlds, resources. The Vrex were giving humanity a gift. Information that would take centuries to gather on their own. These are worlds in your region of space. Empty worlds, no intelligent life. They are yours if you want them. We will not return to this sector. The Vrex Collective withdraws. Earth is yours. Make something beautiful of it." The transmission ended. For 3 seconds, absolute silence covered the entire planet. Then the screaming started. But this time it was joy. In the UN command center, people were hugging each other, crying, laughing. Minho sat frozen in his chair, unable to process what had just happened. Subin threw her arms around him. "You did it," she said. "You saved us." "No," Minho replied quietly. "Humanity saved itself. I just showed them who we really are." Colonel Donghyun Lee gave the order to stand down. His crew cheered. Some cried. Some just sat in shocked silence. They had prepared to die. Now they were going to live. Lieutenant Jisoo Nam removed her helmet and looked at Earth through her cockpit window. The blue planet, small and fragile and still there. Still theirs. She thought about all the goodbye messages she had recorded. She would have to delete those now. In Seoul, Hana Choi called her brother. "Minho, are you watching?" "Yes," he said, his voice cracking. "I was ready to die for Earth," she said. "But you saved it with words. Not just words. Truth." Dr. Yuna Kim stood at the observatory, watching the alien fleet turn away. The massive ships so threatening just hours ago were leaving. Heading back into deep space, she started laughing and couldn't stop. Professor Junho Lee sat in his office looking at the data the Vrex had sent. Star charts. It would take years to analyze it all, decades. But it was a head start on humanity's future in space. 6 months later, the world had changed. The United Nations passed the Message Accords. Every human child would learn about the Vrex encounter. They would study the message that saved humanity. They would understand that their species' greatest weapon wasn't military might, but honest self-assessment and the constant choice to be better. New space programs launched. Humanity began planning missions to the worlds the Vrex had identified. Not to conquer, to explore, to settle, to expand carefully, thoughtfully, with the lessons of Earth's history guiding every step. Min-Ho Choi became an unlikely hero. He didn't want the attention. He just wanted to work. But people needed someone to celebrate, so he endured the interviews and the awards. 6 months after the encounter, a memorial was built on the moon. The first permanent human structure on another world. It was simple. A black wall with words engraved in every human language. They came to conquer. We showed them who we are. All of it, the good and the bad, the beautiful and the terrible. We survived not by hiding our flaws but by owning them. May we never forget. Our greatest strength is knowing our greatest weakness and choosing to be better anyway. Min-Ho stood at the memorial's dedication ceremony. Next to him were Hana, Yuna, Subin, Donghyun, Jisoo, Junho, and Hejin, the people who had faced the end of the world and found a way through. Do you think they were right? Hana asked him. About us being terrifying? Min-Ho thought about it. Humanity was now reaching for the stars with full knowledge of what humans were capable of, both the best and the worst. Yes, he said finally. We're terrifying because we're honest. We know we could be monsters. We've been monsters before, but we choose not to be. That's scarier than any weapon. Why? Because you can defend against weapons. You can't defend against a species that consciously chooses its own morality. That's unpredictable. That's powerful. That's human. Far away in deep space, the Vrex fleet traveled home. Commander Zeloth reviewed the Earth data one final time. He had made the right choice. He knew it. The humans would reach the stars eventually. They would spread. They would grow. And they would carry with them that strange, powerful idea that being good is a choice that must be made every day. The galaxy wasn't ready for humans. Not yet. But in 1,000 years or 10,000, when humanity finally reached the other civilizations, they would bring something new. Something the galaxy had never seen. The conscious choice to be better. Zeloth closed the file. He would monitor Earth from a distance, watch them grow, and when they finally reached the rest of the galaxy, he hoped they would teach the Vrex something in return. How to choose. On Earth, Min-Ho looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Vrex were watching. Somewhere out there, other species waited. Humanity's story was just beginning, and for the first time in history, humans would write that story knowing exactly who they were. Flawed, capable of terrible things, but also capable of choosing to be better. That choice, that simple daily choice, had saved them, and it would define them forever. The stars waited, and humanity, honest and flawed and trying, reached back.